William Wallace, now with his title of Guardian of the Kingdom of Scotland and commander of its army, led one south, raiding from Newcastle upon Tyne to Carlisle and taking anything they could steal. King Edward I, upon hearing of the defeat at Stirling, reluctantly signed a truce with King Philip the Fair of France and returned home to start drawing up the plans for another excursion into the Scottish land. The invasion had begun its preparations in late 1297, but Edward wouldn't return until the middle of March 1298. The first thing he did was move the centre of government to York, where a war council was to be located for the next 6 years, and the final plans were drawn. Edward ordered all Scottish magnates to attend, and when none turned up, much to no one's surprise, they were all deemed traitors to the English crown. Edward ordered his army to assemble at Roxburgh on June 25th, consisting of 2,000 cavalry and 12,000 infantry. Stuart Reid estimates that Edward's forces were that of 214 knights with 900 troops, 1,000 cavalry supplied by earls, 500 mercenary crossbowmen, 2,000 archers with billmen from Lancashire and Cheshire levies, and only 8,000 infantry. Edward would leave Roxburgh on the 3rd of July and arrived in Kirkleton in 2 weeks, where he would await supplies coming in from coastal ports. On the 20th of July, after a Welsh mutiny, Edward advanced and reached Linlithgow the next day. Edward nearly wished to fall back to Edinburgh when he received word that the Scots were located in Torwood, near Falkirk, ready to intercept his retreat. Edward reportedly said that he would not trouble them to seek me, and on the 22nd, placed his army south of Falkirk. While the king wished to rest his soldiers and await the infantry, the cavalry commanders favoured an immediate attack. Stuart Reid calculates the Scots had enough for 4 schiltrons, with 1,000 men each, without including cavalry and archers. These men would have been from Fife, Kinross, Midlothian, Haddington, Stirling, Linlithgow, Lanark, and Mersey. Wallace was recorded to say, "I have brought you to the ring, hope yef can canny." He stood alone, with Moray dead and Comyn's forces absent, as well as those under Robert the Bruce. The Scots arranged themselves into schiltrons, with the centres filled with archers and 500 mounted knights at the rear. The Englishmen divided their cavalry into 4 battles and advanced in echelon. The vanguard, under command of the Earl of Lincoln, moved left to avoid the marshland, followed by the force under John Warrenne. The force under Anthony Beck, Bishop of Durham, along with the King's forces, moved around the marsh to the right. Once in position, the Earl of Lincoln's battle, along with Anthony Beck's, charged and routed the Scottish cavalry. Sir John Stuart stood his ground with the English cavalry, but his archers were overrun by the horsemen. All this, and the schiltrons still held firm. Losing over 100 horses in vain attempts to break the schiltrons, Edward pulled the cavalry back and brought the infantry and archers forward. The archers began to rain arrows down upon the Scots, and with their lack of experience and little to no armour, the Scottish started to fall. They had nowhere to run. Flanked by English infantry and cavalry and under fire from the archers, the Scottish were as much as defeated. The English would only wait until Edward gave the order, until the Scots were thinned out, and then the cavalry and infantry would be sent in to clean up the rest. Edward would occupy Stirling and raided Perth and Ayrshire, but would again retreat to Carlisle by September. The English would invade again in the summer of 1300. While Wallace managed to escape the battle, Sir John Stuart, head of the archers, had died. Macduff of Fife had been slain, and Wallace's second in command, Sir John Graham, would also be killed. He would renounce his title. In the words of Reid, while unquestionably a good partisan leader, William Wallace's military abilities were simply not up to the job of organising, training, and leading a conventional military force. The title was passed on to Robert the Bruce. Wallace had evaded the English until 1305, when John de Menteith would turn Wallace over to the English at Robertson near Glasgow. Letters from Haakon V of Norway, Philip IV of France, and John Balliol were found in Wallace's possession and delivered to Edward. Wallace was taken to London and sent to Westminster Hall, where he would be tried for treason. His defence, unlike most Scots, was that he never swore allegiance to Edward. On top of treason, he was also indicted on charges of committing crimes against civilians, sparing, and I quote, neither age nor sex, monk nor nun, end quote. This would reach local scholars, and some can claim this was the first trial for war crimes in history. Following the trial, Wallace was taken to the Tower of London, stripped naked, and dragged through the City of London. This is where things get a bit graphic, so this is your prior warning if you're not into that stuff. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered, strangled and released while still alive, emasculated, eviscerated, beheaded, and cut into 4 parts. Wallace's head was dipped in tar and placed atop a spike, later to rest on London Bridge, later joined by the heads of his brother John and compatriots Simon Fraser and John of Strathbogie. Wallace's limbs were taken separately to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. In 1956, a plaque was unveiled at his execution site at Smithfield, with the Latin phrase Dico tibi verum libertas, optima rerum nunquam sebil sub nexu vito fili, meaning, I tell you the truth, freedom is what is best. Son, never live your life like a slave. Followed by a Gaelic phrase, Bas agus bod, death and victory. The tale and legend of William Wallace lives on thanks to a poem written in the 15th century by a monk called Blind Harry. However, this poem is not at all accurate, and more of a fictional depiction of the man that stood his ground and defied the King of England.